This is Charter Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerantz, and we are joined today by Jesus Holguin. He is a member of the school board in Moreno Valley, also the president of the California School Boards Association. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. I want to speak with you about what's known as the School District Reserve Cap. It's a bit of inside baseball, but it's important to understand. Explain to us what the School District Reserve Cap is.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for allowing me to be here one more
course.
time, and thank you for letting us share this information with you. The reserves cap, it's first of all, we've never had the reserves cap.
Right.
There's something that came new as an addition to the law last year,
Right.
when the governor signed the budget. And what it does is it creates a cap, a limit on the amount of reserves school districts can maintain in their budgets.
And as I understand it, the way the cap is triggered is when the Prop 2 rainy day fund is triggered. So
Correct.
when the state has enough money to put money into its rainy day fund, school districts are then required to, at some level, do the reverse.
Correct.
Which is decrease the amount of money it puts in its rainy day fund, its
Correct.
reserves.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's why we don't agree with that concept, because we support the concept at the state level to have a rainy day fund.
Right.
But the school districts, we need to have the same thing, and this law creates totally the opposite, as you mentioned.
It seems counterintuitive, one could argue,
Yes.
and it seems almost completely contrary to what Governor Brown has been espousing, which is fiscal discipline, fiscal responsibility.
Yes, and especially local control. You know, the establishment of the
Right.
local control funding formula gives us this opportunity to create our systems at the local level the way we need them, the way the students need,
Right.
and fill those needs. And the reserves cap takes away some of that local control, because now we have to limit the reserves that the districts can establish, rather than having a good plan for the future.
So what your friends at the California Teachers Association would say is that school districts have or could hoard money in the reserves in such a way that it would decrease the amount of money that could be spent on teacher salaries, on school supplies. How would you respond to the CTA's concerns?
The reality is that when the districts have reserves, they have the reserves for specific purposes, you know, unforeseeable circumstances or plans that they have. For example, plans to buy technology, plans to build a high school, plans to build some other things, or plans to implement certain programs. And that's why the districts reserve the money for those purposes. So it's not that they're hiding the money, it's that they're keeping it for specific purposes and things that are not going to happen in the current year, but may happen in the next or in the subsequent year.
Right.
So that's why the reserves there are in place.
So I've learned and I've read that some of the ratings agencies are spooked
Yes.
by the reserve cap.
Right.
As you know, there were school districts during the recession that did not have enough money in their reserves.
Correct.
They were put on notice by the state. And while we're doing well now in terms of our fiscal house being in order, if we hit another recession, school district reserves could drop.
Correct.
And as a result, their bond ratings could drop. And so what's happening on that front?
Well, in the last 7 or 8 years, there was a lot of reduction in budgets, a lot of reduction in programs, because the districts couldn't afford to implement the programs or continue some programs. We lost a lot of people in education because of
Right.
the layoffs, and on and on and on. So a lot of districts had to borrow money to be able to meet their financial obligations over the last few years. And that borrowing cost a lot of money to school districts. They had to pay interest, high interest.
And presumably it would cost more.
Absolutely, yes.
Because their ratings
Yes.
are down because of the school district reserve cap not allowing them to have enough money in a rainy day fund.
The Standard & Poor's said, if the law becomes operational and ultimately compels the district to spend down a significant portion of its available general fund balances, we believe the district's credit quality could suffer. What that means is that the ratings would go down, which means the interest rates will go up.
So look, Governor Brown was very focused on trying to improve California's ratings
Yes.
during the recession.
Right.
The treasurer, the controller, same thing, constantly working to improve ratings, because if your ratings are higher, your interest rates are down. It would seem that that would be a strong argument to reform the
Absolutely.
reserve cap. So why did it not happen this last go around? What went wrong?
Well, CSBA is continuously working on this item. There are conversations almost on a daily basis with the legislators, with staff
Right.
members, with the governor's office, and on and on. And also several other organizations are working with that. But CSBA has taken the lead on this issue, and we're going to continue working towards finding a resolution. We want a complete repeal of this law.
But
That's the bottom line.
You know the CTA is very powerful, and you know the CTA is very much in support of this reserve cap. Given that, could it be that you need to go to the voters to have this repealed? Because, look, the CTA is powerful in Sacramento.
We have enough evidence to demonstrate that this is a bad law. This is a bad financial way to go when it comes to the budgets, when it comes to projections for school districts. And what we have seen in the last few years has demonstrated that the districts could go in a negative condition at any point in time if something happens. We just experienced a lot of rains and floodings in
Sure.
several districts. Moreno Valley experienced some damages to some of the schools. That could be somewhere where they would have to use some of the reserves. If they did not have those reserves, it would be difficult for school districts
what
to
are you going to
fix.
do? I mean, the reserve cap has been triggered because the state is putting money into its rainy day fund. Is that right?
Well, it's not in place yet because certain other conditions have not been met, but could be met at any point
Which
in time.
conditions need to be met? Do you know?
There has to be some deposit into that rainy fund.
Right.
And then there has to be some other areas
Right.
that have to be in place.
So it
And
could be
if
triggered at any moment.
If the economy continues to improve like
Right.
it has, that would trigger to this law to become operational.
Now, here's what's interesting, though. The economy is improving, as we know, amen.
Correct.
But we also know that in 2016, part of the reason we've seen so much money come into state coffers and allow money to go into the rainy day fund was because of Prop 30.
Correct.
But in 2016, as I mentioned, part of Prop 30 money goes away.
Correct.
It's going to lapse. And a lot of that Prop 30 money goes to schools. So how does that play into this conversation?
Well, before the Prop 30 goes away, we're still at risk of the continuing improvement of the economy that would trigger this law.
Right.
Between now and the end of Proposition 30, we're going to continue the conversations as to what are we going to do to continue the fund, the streaming of revenues to the school districts to continue the improvement.
But at the same time, what are you going to do when Prop 30 goes away? Are you concerned that that could send school districts into a fiscal spiral?
If there's not a replacement of Prop 30 or a continuation of Prop 30, then we could face some uncertainties in the financial conditions of the school districts, which would, having the reserves cap in place would really put the districts in a negative
But in
position.
some ways, if Prop 30 goes away, it's more likely that the reserve cap will not be triggered.
But if it gets triggered before Proposition 30 goes away, then we would see a lot of districts getting into the negative conditions.
Right.
And then Prop 30 goes away, and then we'll really see a devastating impact.
Are
on
you
school
working
districts.
to convince the governor and or the legislature to extend Prop 30? Because they've suggested they don't want to extend Prop 30.
Yes, the governor has said that he's not interested in continuing Proposition 30.
At least the sales tax portion.
Correct. But we're continuing the conversations with this office and legislators, of course, to continue Prop 30 or a version of Proposition 30. It could be a different title, perhaps. But I heard Superintendent of Public Instructions that we need to work together to continue to go to the voters again and continue Prop 30.
We need a ballot
extend Prop
initiative
30.
because the governor's not going to support it at this stage.
Correct.
His name is Jesus Holguin. He is the president of the California School Boards Association. My name is Brad Palmer, and you are watching Charter Local Edition.